news edition of the Garden Report. Of course, the big news today, Bradley Beal heading to the Phoenix Suns, forming a big three with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, in exchange for, as Brian Windhorst first indicated, a shockingly low return for Washington. Chris Paul's contract, which it seems like will be guaranteed out of the $30 million, about $25 million, maybe more, but that's the minimum it'll take for the money to work in this trade. Landry Shamet's 3-year, $10 million contract. Check out the full details on that, what's coming back to Washington here. But otherwise, just an array of second-round picks. I believe the Suns could have offered as many as 7 here. It seems like Washington's going to receive much less, though. And the 2 pick swaps, which come in the opposite years of the Nets picks and swaps that Phoenix gave up for Kevin Durant.
CLNS Media's Celtics coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.
And so Phoenix empties the deck here. Going against the new CBA in a pretty aggressive way. They're going to hit this second apron here, which will make it so they can't sign mid-level exception guys. They'll become extremely limited in the kinds of trades that they can do, which we'll get to in a minute here, as well as the ability to sign buyout guys in season and do a sign-and trade, which that's out the window for them anyway. Way too much money here. So they, like last year, will enter the playoffs with an extremely thin lineup and try to find whoever they can to formulate the minutes around those guys. In terms of who's actually signed for next year, it's going to be DeAndre Ayton, of course, who stays in this deal. Surprised he stayed, and they could move on from him to that $32 million contract and try to break that up into multiple players. I think that'll be difficult to accomplish, but possible. Cameron Payne has a $6.5 million partial guarantee for $2 million, which obviously Phoenix will bring back. He might even start as the point guard in Chris Paul's place. And then Ish Wainwright has a $2 million team option that I'm sure they'll pick up. He was a decent wing player for them last year. Among free agents, do have bird rights on Darius Bazley. They brought over restricted free agent, $6 million qualifying offer. I'm sure they'll try to keep him despite his limited role into the playoffs last year. Torrey Craig has the early bird options, so they can offer him 10-ish a year. You can't offer guys who are on early bird restrictions unlimited money, and I'm sure he's not going to make that much anyway, so they can keep Torrey Craig. A similar deal for Jock Landale, early bird, won't make a ton of money, might even be a minimum guy. Bismack Biyombo, same thing, probably a minimum guy. Damian Lee, though non-bird, so they can only bring him back at 120% of $2 million. Is that enough to keep him? For a guy who shot well from 3 last year, maybe not. Josh Okogie, similar deal, a starting level player last year who does not have bird rights with Phoenix. He might find a contract elsewhere, given that they can only offer him a couple $1 million here. Elfrid Payton, that's from another year. Terrence Ross, non-bird. TJ Warren, non-bird. These are guys they need, and some of them may not be retainable because of those money restrictions here. So they're looking for minimum guys to fill out this roster almost entirely across the board. So do I like this trade for them? It's interesting because I actually think this is similar to what it would have looked like in Boston. Beal, Durant, Booker in Boston, if they did a Brogdon and salary type deal with picks, would have been Beal, Brown, and Tatum. A solid playmaker at the top of that hierarchy in Booker and Tatum. Another guy who's more of a scorer in Durant and Brown. And then as a third piece, Beal is a good cutter, a shooter in pedigree, who Ryan Russillo pointed out in his podcast with Bill Simmons that this is a guy who ranks 100th out of 109 shooters who shot as many threes over the last 3 years as Beal did, finish at 34%. He needs to shoot much better than that if he's going to play off Durant and Booker, especially without the ball in his hands more often than not here. He needs to stay healthy, or else that'll put an inordinate amount of pressure on those other stars. There's a lot of red flags here, particularly since, as you've seen with Minnesota and Brooklyn and the Clippers even so far, these all-in deals where you're giving up all your assets, building up an inordinate amount of salary, and limiting the ways that you can improve around the stars, the big three here, especially in this new CBA environment. It's going to give them a short window to win here, and it's going to make it difficult against a deep team like Denver. The Lakers, even, a pretty deep, good, well-rounded team if they're healthy. The Clippers, who I'll get to in just a second here. Uh, Memphis, even, and we'll see, is that a destination for Chris Paul and John Morant's place now? Uh, Paul does go to Washington in this deal. It's a disaster for Washington. I don't even have to spell it out. It speaks for itself. They re-upped him, gave him the no trade clause. Stunned Miami didn't get involved here, and that is the biggest break for the Celtics, that he's not going to land on that Heat team and improve them. They say in a bunch of different reports they're waiting on Lillard. Doesn't seem like Lillard's imminent to move here. We'll see. If they do hold out on him, and that is something I asked Gerard in a live garden report last week, we'll end up looking pretty good waiting on Beal and acquiring Lillard if they're able to do that. But I just don't see that happening in the near future here. So that's a break for Boston. I don't think Boston would have done this deal. Uh, Regardless of how you look at it, it just gives you a 1-year window, and then you got to look at trading Brown or figuring out how you're going to retain the players around the big three, particularly Smart, White, and the two big men. So we'll see how it works. If Phoenix wins a championship on this and you're Boston, you're looking and saying, all right, we could have done a very similar thing here, but it will be a challenge for them. As for Paul, I think one thing you do look at the Suns here, them able to turn Paul, who struggled immensely, who wasn't playing on a great contract and almost ended up waived by this team a week ago. Turn that into Beal is pretty good with seconds and swaps. The price on the surface for a guy with all NBA upside, if he rekindles some of his old play here, is a no-brainer. So it's great from that perspective. It's just how it's going to come together here. Who's going to defend? You need defense. Is Ayton even going to be part of this? And what level can he reach? I thought this might be a deal where he heads out and Daniel Gafford comes back in. Didn't work out that way. So you're going to keep him and try to rely on him, which is a blessing to some degree. Ultimately, for Phoenix here, what's going to matter is whether the Durant end of this thing pans out, because I don't see any scenario where keeping Paul and running this back would have worked. The question you're going to end up asking is whether rolling forward with like a BL Booker, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Ayton type of situation, something a little more sustainable here would have been better than the big three. We'll see. Like I was just going to get to Paul because I do think this is interesting from a Celtics perspective, the Washington angle. Obviously a full sell here now. Reports indicating that he will stay with Washington for now as they try to figure out what's going to be next for him. Of course, it is a $25 million guarantee at least. They could waive that, could stretch that. Then you have to think he goes to the Lakers. Clippers interested here. They could expand the deal, and Clippers could send a Marcus Morris, Eric Bledsoe, or Robert Covington contract over to Washington. All those are expiring. Any two of them would match Chris Paul's salary, and all of a sudden the Clippers are starting Chris Paul at point guard, and Westbrook's still hanging around there. I think that's complicated. Could the Celtics get involved with a Malcolm Brogdon? Of course, the reporting indicated Phoenix had interest in Brogdon. That's obviously done now. Can't make that work after this deal. So would Brogdon be of interest to Washington in exchange for Paul? I don't think so unless there's pick compensation. I don't think they could flip Brogdon for much from there. And I don't think the Celtics would gain much from uh, trading Brogdon plus picks for Paul, especially where Paul has struggled to get to the playoffs healthy. Is a guard logjam still. Who you starting? Who's going to the bench in that case? It's possible, but I would say unlikely at this point. And as for Paul, if he does hit the market, you have to think Miami, Memphis, as I mentioned, makes a ton of sense. And then those two LA teams on minimums, that would be ideal for them. But the Wizards do have a little bit of leeway here to say, all right, let's see if anyone will actually trade for him first. But I think they'll acquiesce to that pretty quickly here if pressured. Teams always seem to do so. So that's your Beal trade. I think Celtics, all in all, staying away from this whole thing is probably going to be the right move, though I am interested to see if any interest emerges on the Paul front, especially if they think that's a guy who can alleviate some of their offensive inconsistency in the big moments. We're, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Never inconsistent. They're always there with the best odds, spreads, futures, and more. Golf rolling along into the summer, but baseball is the big one. They are official partner of Major League Baseball, as well as our official sports wagering partner here at CLNS Media. So go show them some love and get your no sweat bet up to $1,000 when you visit FanDuel.com/Boston. Still a great time to sign up over there if you haven't yet, and go check out some NBA futures as well. Draft coming up on Thursday. I'm sure they have some odds on that if you think there's going to be any surprises. And then, you know, basketball, football, all that will be back here before you know it. So go check that out. FanDuel.com/Boston. Love them. Been great so far here. And of course, welcome back to HelloFresh. HelloFresh.com/16Garden. Love these meal packages. You can make cooking a little more fun, convenient, and to your door, fresh ingredients on ice. You can customize these meals. You can set them to a theme if you like fish, if you like meat, if you're a vegetarian or whatever dietary restrictions you have. HelloFresh can work with that. And it's all quality meals to your door. HelloFresh.com/16Garden is going to get you 16 free meals plus free shipping when you head over there. That's HelloFresh.com/16Garden. And of course, a shout out to Athletic Greens, athleticgreens.com/garden.